listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hi, my name is Barbara Mendes-George, and I'm a sustainability communications expert based in Brussels, Belgium. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Let's Talk Sustainable Business, a series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today is the first of a two-part episode with Dr. Marie Brueser, Corporate Venture Manager at EIT Food, the world's largest food innovation community. Marie has a PhD in plant genetics and has worked in the agri-food startup space for many years now. Previously, as community manager and entrepreneurship leader at Thought for Food, a global community of changemakers in food and agriculture. She is currently based in Munich, Germany. This episode's theme is food and creating a more sustainable global agricultural system. For the next two episodes, I'll be talking to Marie about her work, which is focused on connecting startups with EIT Food's corporate partners to run proof of concept studies or explore other ways of collaborating. With Marie, we'll also be discussing the complexity of food systems and their social, ecological, and economic components, as well as related policies on these topics. Demand for food continues to increase, yet issues such as inequality, food waste, and malnutrition continue to persist. In 2022, around 9.2% of the world population was facing chronic hunger. That's around 735 million people, and a rise of 122 million people since 2019. Unsustainable food production, packaging, and consumption are also contributing to the climate crisis, accounting for a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of the world's freshwater usage, and driving biodiversity loss. So to meet demand, it's not enough to increase productivity in a sustainable way. It is crucial to change from linear mass consumption to a more circular economy and embrace more sustainable agricultural practices such as agroecology, rotating crops, as well as integrating livestock and crops. Nevertheless, across Europe, we have also seen many farmers protest this year, who have taken to the streets for a range of reasons, including unfair remuneration, non-EU trade, and proposed environmental regulations, such as carbon taxes and pesticide bans. Creating a more sustainable global agricultural system is obviously a complex issue. So, with these big questions in mind, I'd like to welcome Marie. I'm really looking forward to discussing sustainable food, agriculture, and entrepreneurship with you today.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Marie. I'd like to start by asking you a bit more about EIT Food, the organization you work for. Could you tell us about your role there and what the company does?
For sure. So EIT Food is co-funded by the European Commission to drive innovation in the food system. And even though it just has EIT Food in its name, we work on anything food system related. So from agriculture to food, to packaging, to digital technologies in the food space, really anything in agri-food. And so we do that in a number of ways. We want to drive innovation to create a sustainable, healthier food system for all. And so we work with educators, for example, so that they can teach the youngest and smallest in classrooms. We work with the public in a lot of activities there with our brand Food Unfolded. We also co-fund innovation projects. And that's where my role comes in. We connect corporates and startups. Obviously, part of that also SMEs, research institutes, universities, and we support startups themselves as well, also by investment and support. So it's a whole big world that comes together to drive innovation in agri-food.
You're also working in a complex system to try and bring people together, if I understand.
Correct.
I wanted to ask, before we kind of get into the main bulk of the questions, why did you choose food and agriculture as the area to focus on in your career?
So that goes back quite some time, right? In school already, I was a little eco-warrior, is how my friends describe me. I refused to eat the kiwis from New Zealand that were handed out in the canteen because I thought they come from too far away. Not many people joined me on that, but somehow this topic of agriculture was always a part that came with me in terms of where our food comes from, and that led me to study environmental sciences. And then I realized that there is career opportunities there, and actually my love for plants can actually lead to really cool roles. And so I did a PhD in plant genetics, as you said. I worked on rapeseed, so I wanted to work on a crop. I wanted to be close to market. And through that, I really discovered the bigger world of agriculture, and then bit by bit also food. And then I realized there's startups that bring new innovation, new science. So still this bit of new that are close to the market, bringing that to people. And it's really where this interlink between food systems, between feeding people sustainably and looking after the planet became really clear to me. And so that's been my driving force ever since, working with startups, supporting them globally and now in Europe. EIT Food is a brilliant organization when you want to drive innovation in Europe, connect with great people, great organizations, great stakeholders, and really drive activities here. So that's bit by bit. We're just following my passion. I was lucky to find my role here.
That's nice when you can combine your passion with your career. And so it sounds like you're really focused on scaling up some of the solutions that are going to tackle some of the issues that I outlined in my introduction.
Correct. Yes, we're seeing a lot of that. I think that's the other part of startups. They offer this lens into the future, right? And so a lot of what's been talked about in the media, we actually have already seen for maybe a few years, if not in a few months already, right? The big trends that are being then spoken about, the articles that are being published in kind of the mainstream media and what's coming up, we've already seen for a little while. And so that's what makes it almost more fun, because we have this lens into the future. And there's a lot of complexity in the food system, big challenges to be tackled, but that also turns into huge opportunities. And so that's exactly where we are.
So going back to those challenges, it would be good to hear a little bit more about EIT Food's approach. So on your website, it says that you take a missions-led approach and you're focusing on three areas: healthier lives through food, net zero food system, and reducing risk for a fair and resilient food. So can you explain what EIT Food means by this missions-led approach and why it has chosen these areas as its three priorities?
For sure. So I think you already heard that EIT Food is a bit of a complex setup because we drive innovation in lots of different ways. And what we realize is that those three missions, one, align with policy that is already out there and some of the goals that we have in Europe, and globally, actually, to fix the food system. But also importantly for us, it helps us take those diverse activities and then measure and communicate the impact that we're having in a much better way than we did before the missions. And so these three help us to guide some of those activities, but also explain them nicely. But you're realizing that they're still quite broad, right? It's really anything food system related you can fit into those. And so we actually have below that our three main priorities that we're currently tackling. And so they are protein diversification, so reducing our meat consumption, going more into alternative ways of eating protein. They're regenerative agriculture, so that's really farming in a way that is best for the soil and for generations to come, instead of depleting the nutrients in what we have. And then the third priority is labeling, packaging, and transparency. So labeling, really bringing in the consumers there, but packaging also being a really big one, obviously reducing plastics, reducing single-use items, and transparency, again, making sure that our supply chains are set up in a way that also consumers are able to understand where their food comes from and have that high trust in it. So within these three priorities that fit nicely into those missions, we have a really nice Northern Star, and can align our activities to that.
Yeah, wow, a lot to do at your organization. And actually, I want to just check. You mentioned that you're working in Europe, but elsewhere as well. So, are you working in particular geographical areas, or kind of anywhere that's linked to where the funding is?
So we got co-funded by the European Commission to drive innovation in Europe and associated countries. So that's obviously mainly the geography of Europe, right? So Iceland to Israel is what I like to say. It includes the UK as well. It includes Switzerland. But then we can also go beyond the European borders. So quite tangibly, for example, for our startup acceleration program, the EIT FAN, we work with startups in Brazil as well. So we have a partner there, right? EIT Food is a partner organization, so you can become a member of EIT Food. And one such partner now is in Brazil and is supporting startups there using the methodology we've developed here, and then using that for the startups there. And then we can link them to Europe as well. And so that's what we do a lot. Also with Singapore, for example, we also have outreach programs. So recently we had one in Japan, where basically we go there, we discover their ecosystems, we share about ways of working here, and then we see where the links are. Because especially when we're talking about the food system, it's always a global setup, and we can't just think in a small region.
Absolutely. And if you can help other regions, but also learn lessons from other regions, why not do that as well?
Exactly. No, agreed.
So you mentioned obviously that most of your work focuses on working with startups. So can you share some stories of some of the startups that you're working with? Are they in specific sectors? What startups are you looking to work with in future?
So the startups we work with, right, are anything agri-food specific, which is still a quite broad remit, really. And we're looking for new technologies. So we're looking for really novel things that we haven't seen before that are typically protected by patents then. And that can go from your 3D printed salmon or 3D printed meat alternatives. That goes to delicious mycelium based meat alternatives. So, this is like the rooting structure of mushrooms that create a
Mhm.
really great texture. Technologies that reduce food loss and food waste, right? So, a lot of the upcycling coming in there. So, really, that circular economy. Obviously, packaging, right? I mentioned earlier, that's one of our priorities. That's a big one. And then, really tangibly, I like great examples that are replacing palm oil, that are sugar alternatives. And obviously, on the agriculture side, we're seeing really nice things happening with satellite data, with drones as well. As we're able to crunch more data, we're able to really see a lot more what's happening and help farmers be more precise in their applications, reduce their inputs, become more sustainable in that sense. And so it's really anything there down to dynamic pricing in the supermarket. And the way we work with startups then is in 3 programs. So for really early stage ones, so we're working with master students, for example, that have found something really exciting in the lab and now thinking, well, how can I bring this to the market? So that's one target group that we have. Otherwise, established companies and scaling companies that you may have already read about in the media, they also come to us and we help them with visibility, with attracting funding, and then in my role, creating that link to the corporates.
Super interesting. I'm especially intrigued by 3D printed salmon, I have to say,
Well,
especially as a
it's
vegetarian.
So that one is on the market in Germany and in Austria by Revo Foods.
Okay,
So
wow.
come visit me in Munich and we'll have some 3D printed salmon.
I will absolutely take you up on that, Marie. I will research trains as soon as we get off this this recording.
Sounds good.
Um, can you provide one or two like concrete examples of startups that you're working with, projects that you found very inspiring or that have progressed very nicely in the last few years?
Yeah, sure. So one that I quite like because it's a bit different is Kerntech from Austria. So they work with the pips and pits of apricots and
Hmm.
cherries, right? So within that, we all know them. We eat the fruit. We get rid of what's inside of the pip. And what they found is actually you can crack that open, and within that you have another nut. So it's a little bit like an almond. And from that, you can make delicious milks, for example, or chocolate spread alternatives. And so they've developed a technology to crack open these pips and to then use that what's in there to be an ingredient for alternative protein, dairy products. So that's a really nice one that I like. Also tastes delicious.
Mm.
I think the other one is, for example, no palm ingredients from the Netherlands. That again, with their palm oil alternative, are really creating big waves, and it's obviously a big challenge that again is more global. So I think that one is really nice as well as a tangible example. There's also A grain from Denmark that upcycles brewers' spent grain, right? So in the brewing,
Mhm.
what's not needed, what's not used, they upcycle that and create delicious crackers as well as granola. But really, it's an ingredient of flour that can be used in anything. So those are really nice ones. Also, Green Spot Technology from France, they upcycle pretty much anything. For example, the tomato ends, right? When you buy sandwiches, you never get the end of a tomato. So they use that to make delicious new ingredients.
Super, super interesting. And I guess, yeah, an issue with a lot of those, I'm thinking of the what's in the apricot pits and the tomato ends is obviously there needs to be a way to collect that. So, I mean, I guess that's the kind of challenge that you're helping with to trial it and then see if it can become a bigger
Yes, the
project.
logistics is a big one, but we're seeing really nice and creative solutions come up for that. Also using coffee spent grain and upcycling that. So EcoBean, based in Poland, are really doing really nice jobs there, where they figured out they're working with a logistics company to pick up all that coffee that has been used, right? That's no longer needed, to bring that then to centralize it and to create new products from oils to ingredients out of it. But yes, logistics is always a challenge here.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I will shout out as well. In Belgium, there is an organisation that collects coffee grounds to grow mycelium as well. And in my previous company, which is also your previous company, Marie, we even went to a workshop where we made our own mushrooms that we planted and grew. So yeah, it's very nice to see. Not only that those kinds of organizations exist, but they continue and grow into a bigger ecosystem. And yeah, speaking of a bigger ecosystem, so we talked quite a lot about the startup side, but as your role is to connect startups and corporates, could you tell me some more about that? Could you give me some examples of the corporates that you're working with? And again, kind of what are the topics that you see come up from them? Or what do you
Mhm.
see as the kind of trends at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Um, So I think, right, as going from the startup perspective again, one, you need an idea, which they all have, and you need the technology, which they have, and then funding is the other thing they need. And the third thing is really the scale up support. And that's what got me excited about this role, because through these partnerships, you can drive these technologies to the market much faster. You can reach new places. But also for the companies involved, it can mean for them a new way of doing things. And so that's why this collaboration piece is so exciting. And so within our team there, we work with big names like Corteva, like Bayer Crop Sciences, like Cargill, ingredient companies like IFF, for example, or AAK. But then we also work with the finished products like Mondelez, for example, that opens a whole new world, or Mars Pet Care, right? It doesn't always have to be a human nutrition. And we actually work with a lot of SMEs as well. And what's exciting there is that they're often more agile because they're smaller, so they can do things faster, easier. Of course, you don't have that giant scale, but also the processes are a lot easier. So while they don't have the big flashy names at times, they're actually really great partners. And maybe to give you like a really nice tangible example, one that I enjoyed a lot was where we worked with Haagen-Dazs, so the ice cream brand of General Mills, and they gave us three specific things they were looking for, and we went out and scouted startups for them. And those three things were: one, reducing the sugar in the ice cream; two was new ingredients for the ice cream; and then three was how to reduce the energy needs for the cooling cabinets, right? That then store the ice cream. So when you go into the store and you buy it, how to reduce energy there. And so clearly, right, the targets here is how to make it healthier, how to keep up with competition without new ingredients, and then obviously sustainability at the core with the energy, reducing that. So we looked for startups for them. They invited the top 10 to their research center, getting a lot of staff involved and breaking the ice a little bit on what startups are. So it's the first time that they did something like this. And I think sometimes we talk about startups and we imagine this scruffy 20-year-olds that kind of, broke off the university studies to create this great software. And that can be a little bit daunting. And so we brought it to life. These startups went to visit them. And now actually they have two that they're continuing to work with and really tangible next steps. And so for the startups, it's a great experience to see how Haagen-Dazs and how General Mills operates, to get feedback on their product, but also obviously for tangible next steps. And for Haagen-Dazs, it was a really nice way to embrace open innovation, to understand what startups do, and one, to have tangible next steps, but two, also just use that inspiration of how to do things differently. Working in open innovation, getting those insights coming in from the outside is also really nice to kind of break open a little bit and really drive innovation in that sense. So that was a really fun one with really tangible next steps.
Yeah, fascinating. So it sounds like with Haagen Dazs, then they came to you. They know that they wanted something like that. Do you sometimes kind of reach out to corporates who aren't perhaps doing that automatically and suggest that as an approach for them to kind of resolve their problems, or is it more that people approach you?
It's a mix of both. So we go to the main events where we see both kind of startups and innovators, but also where big corporates or the SMEs are, and where we talk about kind of the challenges that we currently have, right? Whether that's sustainability, whether that's innovation. So we're there and we engage actively in conversations. And so there's really seeing, okay, where is the company at already? Because you have some that already have this open innovation department, or that they have a startup person, right, who is there to set up these collaborations. And so with them, we then can scout for their challenges, because through our reach, through our partner networks, we're able to reach fantastic solutions from all over Europe that they may not otherwise have found. But others haven't done this before, but are seeing, and actually we're seeing this come up a lot more, where they're seeing, okay, we need to open up. We need to work with others. The way we've done things, where we only looked internally, we need to change it. And so they're curious about what this looks like. They're curious about open innovation in general, right? It doesn't just have to be startups. It can be collaborating with universities, with research institutes. And that's where we come in as well. And we can advise them on what might make sense, on the mission they have around it, and the vision they have, and the KPIs they want to achieve, and then work with them to set that up, to create that internal dialogue as well. And then really, once they're ready, hit the ground running and connect them to the right startups, the right innovators.
Wonderful. Your collaboration facilitators, and we all know that to make change, collaboration is absolutely key.
Yes.
And kind of related to that, so companies can, tap into the startup world to reach their sustainability goals. You talked
Correct.
about Haagen-Dazs having those 3 targets. So do you see that then as something that is happening more frequently, that the companies don't just have like an internal sustainability team that tries to do everything? They're going through different methods of collaboration and reach out to kind of become more sustainable, whether that's reducing carbon emissions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. So we're definitely seeing that a lot more in different ways, right? So one is even just EIT Food in general. They come to us, they want to become a partner because they want to connect with others. They want to hear what others are doing in general. Towards our team then, working with startups, a lot more as well, because they're realizing, okay, there's an opportunity there, and where other industries are doing this already for some time. There's nice case studies out there. Maybe it's time for food and agriculture to also adopt this. So there is that curiosity about it, but also there's this big shift where, okay, yes, sustainability is what we can drive forward with this. And that just doesn't come from them. There's studies on that as well. One was published late 2023 on kind of open innovation, right? Where 1,000 leaders from companies, from global companies, were asked about their open innovation practices. And they said that, or 75% of them said that open innovation helps them solve complex challenges like their sustainability challenges. So it's a really good lever to do that. And so we're seeing that in the discussions as well. And we're using that also because, of course, internally, it's a really big driver. So it's something where they can then also drive activities with, because it's something that's on their mind. Also because of the new legislations, right? With the CSRD, with the ESRS coming in, they're realizing that, okay, there's something we need to do here. And we're seeing topics like packaging, for example, having a really big driver. Now, I think the last year and a half, it's been really top of mind. So we did a challenge with Danone on this, where they were looking for packaging solutions. And we also have a focus on that in our accelerator, where we supported 10 fantastic startups this year. And actually, corporates can join that accelerator as well. And so that was great to see, because we had a lot of companies coming in thinking, okay, we'll use reuse models, right? That must be the way. And actually, it was a really nice opportunity for both sides to learn from each other, where we also saw the shift going from reuse to actually fully circular to fully biodegradable because of these interactions with the startups. And the startups obviously now have opportunities to work together to scale their technologies with the companies. So I think that's one. And the other topic is, right, again, scope 3 emissions, because so many realize, okay, scope 3 is where we need to reach reductions, or where a lot of our emissions are happening and what can be done. And that's where we're seeing regenerative agriculture really coming in. Obviously, it's been a buzzword for a few years now, but we're really seeing action now happening, because I think at the beginning, there's a bit, okay, what can we do? What is this? What little things can we do here and there, and little pilots and little proof of concepts? And that's now scaling. And so as EIT Food, we've pledged 30 million towards regenerative agriculture. And we're setting up these regenerative agriculture portfolios, where we're working with companies that are focused on a region, from different parts of the supply chain, coming in and really looking at, okay, what does it take to create a regenerative agriculture ecosystem here? So again, why that's a challenge is because farmers have to change how they're farming. They're looking at, how can we improve the soil? So how can we draw in more carbon, which often means different growing practices, also perhaps smaller fields or ways of doing things. So they need funding to make that happen. But the companies also need to look at what their supply chain looks like at that point. And so we're bringing all these players together, focusing on a region to see how can we really scale this. And so, yeah, region ag and packaging are really big topics that we've seen come up with that sustainability mindset, really like front and center.
Yeah, I was nodding vigorously when you were talking about scope 3 emissions, because there's just so much different legislation, not just the EU CSRD, but worldwide, other legislation that I think slowly, surely, scope 3 is going to become mandatory, and there's a huge challenge there. And I feel personally as well, in the people that I deal with, people who have only done scope 1 and 2 now are suddenly waking up to the fact that it's quite difficult, what needs to happen. So, I'm sure they can help. And I found it interesting that throughout this first part, you mentioned that packaging was really kind of a hot topic at the moment, because as someone who's worked in sustainability since 2010, I feel like packaging, especially plastic, suddenly in the mid 2010s, it became kind of a consumer concern, that people worried about plastic, worried about several things. And then I think with COVID coming, that shifted a little bit. And I think people's relationship to packaging changed when it was kind of related to hygiene and other things. So it's really interesting to see that kind of food companies are still concerned about it and still trying to come up with solutions to make it more sustainable.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. And at the same time, we're seeing more fantastic innovations coming up. And these companies, I think, almost more than any other, have this circular element at their core, where they're really clear on every single step we do should be circular. We don't want to become part of the problem. And I think, yeah, packaging really that biodegradable, that it will just disappear like it was never there, is really the heart of a lot of these companies. And so it's been fantastic to see. And I think innovation and technology is just coming a lot further to actually implement these. And at the same time, I think, like you say, right, it was driven by consumers, and then we all remember the paper straws that were terrible. And then we got better alternatives that looked more like the previous plastic, at which point everyone says, whoa, why do I have a plastic straw? Which led to some going back to paper simply for the consumers to be happy again. So there's a little bit of a communication piece needed here for us to understand, okay, what are these alternative ingredients or these alternative packaging technologies that we can use that are better for the environment, but that also give us the functionality that we need and that we want, obviously in a much bigger scope than straws, right?
Absolutely. And these things are never straightforward, right? You mentioned how you boycotted the kiwis from New Zealand, but actually sometimes the kiwis from New Zealand are a more sustainable option than the kiwis grown in a Dutch greenhouse, right? So sometimes what is the most sustainable, in inverted commas, isn't the most logical or the most consumer friendly. So I'm sure that, yeah, you have to help companies deal with that as well.
Correct. And that's where labeling is really important. I think it's really hard as the consumer, right? You want to do it right, but you don't have the facts, so you want them to be easy to find, and that is often not the case. And we're trying, right? We have labeling as one of our priorities, so we're working on that, and really seeing what can be done to empower consumers to be smarter in their choices, or just to have the information readily at hand so that they can make the decisions that they want to make and support what they want to support.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Marie, for joining us today. This is the first of a 2-part episode, so join us next time for part 2. And thanks to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to this podcast series and explore the entire catalogue of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. See you next time.
That was Let's Talk Sustainable Business.